Welcome to this Tutor to You sociology topic video on culture and identity, focusing on postmodernism and culture. Post and late modernist ideas of culture emerged in the latter part of the 20th century as a challenge to the dominant structural ideas of what culture is and how it is formed. They generally take a more pessimistic view of culture, suggesting that increased diversity, in part as a result of globalisation, has led to individuals rejecting mass culture in favour of a more individualistic approach. This growth of individualism, a result of an acceleration in some of the features of modernity such as secularisation, rationality and scientific thinking, has led people to reject meta-narratives or one-size-fits-all explanations of culture and human behaviour. These have been rejected in favour of a more pick-and-mix approach. For postmodernists, culture is not a homogeneous entity, but rather a fragmented and diverse mixture of multiple influences. Jean-Francois Lyotard suggested that culture has become fragmented because individuals have rejected the meta-narratives or grand stories of the past. Whilst in the modern era, people had similar experiences of culture, in contemporary society, people prefer to see themselves as individuals, with their own narratives and understandings of culture and what forms their identity. This, according to Lyotard, is a reaction to the failings of Enlightenment, a period that questioned the established order of society and offered explanations through scientific thinking and rationality. However, while the Enlightenment raised a lot of questions, ultimately it failed to deliver answers or provide workable solutions for ordinary people. As a result, individuals looked away from these explanations, choosing their own versions of the truth, and this is reflected in contemporary cultural norms and values, increasingly diverse and often complex to negotiate. One of the reasons for increased cultural diversity, according to postmodernists, is the impact of globalisation. This period is thought to have coincided with the fall of communism and the improved international relations and subsequent interconnectedness between nations. This led to greater influence of global ideas on culture of nation states, particularly linked to the spread of Western capitalism. As consumer culture spread, and with the growth of transnational corporations to meet the demands of consumer culture, this led to the development of a global culture of consumption, fueled by cheap imports, reduced labour costs and increased transportation. However, global culture has met with resistance, with many arguing that the spread of westernised cultures leads to cultural imperialism, whilst the spread of consumer culture threatens the environment. This has led to anti-globalisation and anti-capitalist movements, a symptom of late and postmodern society, increased risk that accompanies increased choice and diversity. Another feature of culture that postmodernists focus upon is media saturation. Strinati argues that the digital revolution and technological globalisation have led to an explosion of new media sources, each providing information to audiences. This growth of new media has caused an overload of competing perspectives, and people are less able to process the vast amounts of information and viewpoints that are presented to them. According to Strinati, this impacts on the cultural norms of society, making them less homogeneous, changing the values that society deems as acceptable, eroding social cohesion, and calling into question the effectiveness of social institutions. This has far-ranging impacts on politics, as evidenced by the political polarisation in the UK over issues such as Brexit, in religion, with the rise of fundamentalism and conversely religious intolerance, and also through education and wider culture. The overload of information quite simply means that individuals are unable to translate what is expected of them in society, and they turn to sources for guidance. And not all of these sources are reliable. A final contribution of postmodernity to our understanding of culture comes from Baudrillard, who argued that in postmodern society, what we perceive as most important is often things that do not exist. He suggested that in contemporary society we often turn to signs and symbols, what he called simulacra, and these provide us with status from others. But in reality, they do not exist. For example, designer clothing or brands that promote a specific form of lifestyle are symbols. Whilst the product physically exists, it does not give the owner that specific lifestyle. Nike trainers do not make people more athletic. Apple phones do not make an individual have an on-the-go lifestyle. Baudrillard argued that culture is saturated with these signs and symbols, and it leads to a distortion of what society is actually experiencing. This hyper-reality, typified through advertising, online profiles and media production, does not reflect what is real. Whilst it influences culture, this relationship between reality and hyper-reality is dysfunctional. In evaluating postmodern approaches to culture, it's important to consider the extent to which individuals are free from structures within society. Whilst there is greater diversity and people are able to act out of their traditional gender, social class or ethnic groups, the relevant point made by postmodernists is the rejection of meta-narratives and the distrust of experts. Brexit, anti-vaccine movements, climate change and COVID denial are all examples of distrusting expert opinion that is placed before the population, seeing scientific and rational thinking as a mechanism of control over individuals. Finally, postmodernism does explain the growth of hybrid cultures. As people choose from a broader range of influences, new cultures are formed. It also explains the influence of global culture and individualism in society, and so has some merit in offering explanations of culture, and particularly how culture forms in the 21st century. That concludes this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on culture and identity, focusing on postmodernism and culture. Thanks for watching.